Do not run away, ladies and gentlemen. It is not Daniel King today for PowerPlayChess. I replace him, Yannick Peltier, Grandmaster from Switzerland. I guess Daniel King needs a little break because he's making this daily commentary here for you on the games from the Pike and Z, and today he needed probably a little rest, so I'm taking over for round 6, and I have chosen the encounter between the two young Russians, Daniil Dubov and Vladislav Artemiev, for this show tonight. Well, Daniil Dubov was on 50% before this game, and he decided to test Artemiev's preparation and possible improvement upon his earlier game in the tournament against Firuzia. In round 3 there was this Firuzia Artemiev where the young Iranian, who now plays for FIDE, or he has kind of left his federation, and he tried this c4, and Artemiev did not really react adequately. Apparently he was a little bit out of book. In that game he played knight e7, as you can see in Daniel King's commentary a few days ago. He did make a broadcast on that game, Firuzia Artemiev, which followed the path bishop g5, queen b6, rook c1, and here, well, he didn't play it the best possible way and ended up into trouble. So it was certainly interesting to try and test whether Artemiev had an improvement up his sleeves, and indeed he came up with an early change here on move 6, bishop e7. This is no novelty at all. It has been played before in many games among good players. Even Karpov has played like this before. Dubov decided to take on d5, clearing the tension in the center in order to get a clear pawn structure there, very similar, or actually completely similar to what we can have in the French advanced variation, with this pawn d4, e5, this pawn center against d5 and e6. Bishop d3, bishop takes, queen takes, knight c6, knight f3, and up till here Artemiev was still prepared, and knight h6 is actually a move which is suggested by the engine. Well, depending perhaps which engine you're using, but definitely knight h6 looks like a logical move. The knight would like to go to the nice square f5, which is now almost free. The knight would be untouchable on f5 since bishops have been exchanged, light squared bishops. So Dubov's decision to swap it off here, bishop takes h6, is very logical. Rook takes h6, rook c1, technically a novelty, but this move is very logical. You just occupy the open file. King f8, g3, g6. Well, in this position Artemiev had to choose between several plans, and g6, as we will see, followed by moving the king and trying to reroute the rook h6 toward the center, seems to be sensible. Queen b6 may appear as the usual French move, castle, and here, well, if you've played queen b6, you certainly want to try and take on b2, because if you play anything else, then knight a4 is going to come, and then knight c5, very similar maneuver to what we're going to see in the game. So queen takes b2, rook b1, queen a3, we take on b7, knight a5, and here, well, the rook could perhaps retreat, but there is also rook d7, which seems to be quite unpleasant, and well, white manages here to keep the initiative. We can see that black's forces are a little bit, well, here and they're not all together coordinated, so definitely black's struggling still a little bit here. Instead of that, he decided to play a bit more solidly, g6, which is very sensible. Castle, king g7, knight a4, and this is also a very logical move. The knight trying to reach c5, and actually he's going to reach c5. When you have an open file in chess, usually this open file has two main features. At first, you basically want to occupy it with your heavy pieces and enter into the opponent's camp, try to invade it in order to either attack the king or try to remove all the pawns from the 7th rank, for instance. But there is also another slightly more subtle element with the open file, which is the outpost for a piece. And here we have a beautiful outpost, which is the square c5, which white can use in order to try and eventually perhaps invade black's camp. So by using c5, he's going to use his advantage on the open files. He's the only one to occupy it at the moment, and he's going to use this square as an operation square in order to develop his play furthermore. Rook h8 coming back, knight c5. Well, this knight is very strong, so it seems very logical to exchange it. Rook takes, queen d7, rook fc1, rook hc8. So far everything logical. Now black is ready to remove the knight and try and exchange rooks on the open file. So queen c3 is logical. And in this position, well, Artemiev certainly considered the knight e7, and he probably assessed this continuation as slightly worse for him. Rightly so. After rook c7, takes, rook d8, white is in the driving seat. There is nothing to argue about here. He is in control of the open file. He has more space. This is also a very important element we haven't talked about or barely talked about earlier, but this pawn on e5 gives white a space advantage in the center on the king side. So he's a little bit better everywhere, but black's position remains solid, resilient. He has no real weakness, and well, with good defense, he could actually hope to hold the draw. But of course, I've said the word defense, and black probably didn't really want to defend. And usually in these situations, when you try and hesitate, you hesitate a little bit and you try to compare continuations which are all a little worse, you sometimes do not react in the most accurate way. And Artemiev decided to try and be active, but as we're going to see, this was only pseudo activity which eventually created weaknesses in his camp. He went a5, a3, a4. So yes, he has taken some space on the queen side here, but this pawn on a4 can also easily become weak. And Dubov played here knight e1, trying to bring this knight to d3, perhaps later to c5 or f4. So this knight would have some options from d3. And here Artemiev played queen e7, which is pretty clever, because after knight d3 there is perhaps g5. Now the knight has gone away from the king side, and with g5 black certainly tries to open some files, some lines on the king side, which well, did not seem to suit Dubov too much here, since he went back to f3 with the knight, repeating the position once. Queen d7. Well, I'm sure Artemiev didn't really think that Dubov would repeat moves, but he certainly didn't see anything better than this move. And here king g2, obviously Dubov playing on. And here again, probably Artemiev should have tried knight e7 again. Rook c7 is the continuation to be tried again. Takes, and rook d8. And well, there is a difference compared to the line we had before when the pawn was still on a7. Is that this pawn on a4 could easily become a weakness. For instance, after queen a5, I can hit here and it's not so easy, but here still there is rook c8. And I'm going to take back on c8 with the knight, and perhaps I'll manage to kind of equalize. But here you can keep some tension with rook c3. This rook on c3, I mean, you keep the tension, and perhaps it's going to be switch to the king side to f3 after knight g5. You know, there are some ideas like this. And if black plays knight c6, just go to b6, holding the pawn on d4, so you're making sure that knight g5 will be possible. Perhaps you might want to play queen b5 at some point, although you have to be careful of tactics. But in any case, white keeps an advantage, even though queen c8 and the computer claims that black is kind of all right. But still, when you look at the position from, you know, outside just with a human eye, you notice that white has more space, the black king is slightly weaker. This is an important feature. The pawn on a4 could be weak, so there are some elements for white which basically say or claim that white has to be better here. But this continuation would have been better than game rook c7, queen c2, queen d8. By playing queen c2, Dubov certainly already saw the maneuver he was going to play. He has a plan here. Queen c2 now to d1, rook d7. By the way, black's last moves were a little sad because he's now left the c file, so he has abandoned the fight for the c file, and that means that white is just, you know, the master of the position here. So knight g5, coming back to white's plan, knight g5, rook a6, and well, here Dubov carried on with his plan, although I have to admit that rook 1 c3 looks really strong as well. The rook is ready to shift again to the f file, perhaps then to f6, and you can imagine all sorts of sacrifices looming here on e6, for instance. Yet Dubov played the g4, and this was his plan. The queen was on c3 earlier, but he wanted to play g4. And in order to keep d4 protected, he needed to go to d1. So you can see that by going to d1, he always keeps, on a triangle, he always keeps the pawn d4 protected, and he allows his knight to jump to g5. Queen h8, queen f3, and in this position, Artemiev committed a mistake, probably the decisive mistake, I would say. He should have taken on g4, clearly. Queen takes g4, perhaps play now queen h5, although white will never exchange queens in this position. He's going to play queen f4 and keep attacking chances, the c file, and most trumps in this position. So basically white is clearly better, but there is still some work to be done in order to get the win here. Yet here, rook b6, this was the idea of Artemiev when he played rook a6 earlier, to bring this rook to a more active position along the b file, and basically carrying on the whole plan he had earlier by playing a5 and a4. So he wanted to activate his rook, kind of say the c file is well blocked by the knight. I can try to activate my rooks in another way. Yet we're going to see that this backfires. Dubov took on h5, and now, well, good or bad, clearly black had to take with the pawn here. Queen g3, king f8, and rook a5. This is a nice little trick which we're going to see again in the game. And after rook d8, just rook takes a4, claiming an extra pawn and a very strong attack. Black is basically lost here, but less than what happened in the game. He took with the queen, and he certainly missed this idea. Okay, queen f6 is clear, king g8, and now I guess he missed rook a5 when he decided to go for rook b6. He missed this very beautiful move, rook a5, so he's actually making sure that one of his two rooks is going to enter on the 8th rank of black, and creating a mating net here. So rook a8 is clearly the threat. If you take on a5, rook c8, check, and you're going to mate. On the next move, rook d8 takes on d8. Artemiev played queen g4 check, king f8, and look at the beautiful job this knight on g5 is performing. He does not only contribute in attacking, of course, but also in defending. He protects, he controls this very important square on h3, not giving the queen a check on h3 and basically controlling many squares. We often say that the knight is the best defender, the best friend of the king when it is very close to it, protecting it, holding squares. But here, even from afar, it does perform a great job. Well, of course, if rook a6, this costs a piece and black doesn't have perpetual check here after queen takes h4. There is again a knight move, knight h3, protecting the king, and white is completely winning. Artemiev played knight d8, but after rook a8, he resigned. Again, no check here, and the knight is doomed on d8. A beautiful strategical performance by Daniel Dubov. You can see how important space is in chess, even though material may be slightly reduced. Here I think there were a few strategical features in this game which were extremely instructive. Space, open file, outposts in a way, and trying to play on both flanks when you have an advantage overall. So great performance, great game by Dubov, and another loss in this line by Artemiev, who will have to do some homework before his next black game for sure, because these guys in top tournaments, they smell blood, and whenever you show weakness, whether in a certain line or in some other ways, they go for it and they try to catch you there. And this is exactly what Daniel Dubov did in this game. The standings after 6 rounds in vacancy: 2 leaders, Wesley So and Alireza Firuzia with 4 out of 6. The world champion Magnus Carlsen struggling a little bit to find his form. He's made 6 draws so far. He's shared 6th rank with a few other players, so he has 3 points. We're gonna see what happens next. Thanks a lot for your attention, and of course it's not my channel, but still I'd like to encourage you to like this video, to like the channel, to subscribe to this channel. So thanks a lot in advance, and see you soon perhaps.